Hello everyone, my name is Grace Clifton and today I'm presenting my research on how the tone of crime reporting influences perceptions of guilt. I chose this topic because sensationalized crime media is extremely common, and even small wording differences can shape how dangerous or guilty someone appears. This matters because public opinion and even jury decision making can be influenced long before any evidence is presented in court. My study asks whether simply changing the tone of a crime summary while keeping all the facts identical can meaningfully shift how guilty people think a suspect is. I've always been interested in wrongful convictions and how media plays a role in shaping public perception. Most people never witness serious crime firsthand, so they rely on media coverage, which is often emotional or dramatic. I wanted to understand whether sensational language alone could bias people's impressions. If tone changes how guilty someone seems, it highlights how easily public opinion and jury pools can be influenced unintentionally. This question is important for both media ethics and fairness in the criminal justice system. These questions are what guided the study. The main one asks whether narrative tone affects judgments of guilt. If the sensationalized version produces higher guilt ratings, that suggests wording alone can shift perception. I also examined whether sensationalism increases fear, perceived dangerousness, or belief in stronger evidence, because these reactions often shape how people will interpret crime. Finally, I wanted to see whether personal background, like prior justice system involvement, might influence how people respond to different reporting styles. Research shows that media framing plays a major role in shaping how audiences understand crime. Even small shifts in wording can highlight danger, blame, or uncertainty. Sensational reporting tends to heighten emotional responses and can make people more confident in their judgments, even when the information is ambiguous. Cognitive psychology also shows that vivid or emotional content is easier to remember and seems more believable. These findings suggest that sensationalized reporting might lead people to judge suspects more harshly, which informed the hypothesis for my study. My study used an independent group's design with 20 participants. 10 read a factual version of a crime summary and 10 read a sensationalized version. Both summaries contained identical facts, the only difference was their tone. Participants then completed Likert-scaled questions measuring guilt perception, fear, evidence strength, and other psychological responses. This allowed me to see whether narrative tone produced meaningful differences. Data was analyzed through t-tests and the Mann-Whitney U, depending on normality. The goal was to isolate the effect of tone on people's impressions of the suspects. These excerpts illustrate how the manipulation worked. The factual version used neutral objective language, what you might see in a formal police report or a straightforward news statement. The sensationalized version used more emotionally charged words, framing the suspect as unpredictable or dangerous and amplifying the dramatic aspects of the crime. What's important is that the facts stayed identical across both versions. If participants rated guilt differently, it indicates the wording, not the information, drove their judgments. To analyze the data, I first tested for normality using the Shapiro-Wilk test. Variables that were normally distributed were tested using independent samples t-test. Variables that were not normal were analyzed with the Mann-Whitney U test. This approach allowed me to compare the two groups on each dependent variable because my primary interest was whether the sensationalized group responded differently than the factual group. Each dependent variable was examined individually. This method gave me a clear picture of which psychological responses were strongly influenced by narrative tone and which ones were more stable regardless of tone. The descriptive statistics help us understand the general trends before looking at significance. Even at this level, the pattern was clear. The sensationalized group consistently scored higher on guilt, confidence, fear, and dangerousness. These baseline differences set the stage for the statistical results, but the descriptive data alone already hinted that tone was shaping participants' impressions in a meaningful way. This was one of the strongest findings. Participants who read the sensationalized version rated the suspect as significantly more guilty than those who read the factual version. This finding alone supports the idea that media tone, not the facts, can alter how guilty someone appears. It also reinforces concerns about pretrial publicity and the potential for biased reporting to shape public opinion. What's especially interesting is that participants were not only more likely to think the suspect was guilty, they were also more confident in that assessment. That means sensationalism doesn't just change opinions, it strengthens them. This aligns with research showing that emotional content increases certainty, even when the information is ambiguous. Participants exposed to the sensationalized version reported significantly higher fear. This suggests that the emotional language triggered threat responses, which in turn may have influenced their judgments. Fear is a powerful motivator in how people evaluate danger and responsibility. If a story makes them feel threatened, they may be more inclined to assume the suspect is dangerous or guilty. These findings show that sensationalized reporting can alter perceptions of evidence and danger, even when the underlying evidence is identical. Participants thought the evidence was stronger and that the suspect was more dangerous simply because of the way the story was framed. This highlights why narrative tone matters. If it can exaggerate the perceived strength of evidence, it can inadvertently bias public understanding and potentially affect real-world legal outcomes. Interestingly, variables related to deeper reasoning, like moral thinking, cognitive reflection, and media literacy, did not show significant differences between groups. This suggests that narrative tone influences fast, intuitive reactions more than deliberate reasoning. People may form initial impressions quickly, but those impressions do not appear to shift their underlying values or reasoning patterns. These results collectively show that sensationalized reporting significantly alters first impressions and emotional responses. This supports the literature suggesting that framing and emotional tone influence how audiences understand crime. Even small changes in wording made participants more decisive, more fearful, and more punitive. This has important implications for media ethics and criminal justice because public opinion contributes to jury pools, policy attitudes, and trust in institutions. The practical implications extend beyond journalism. Courts may need stricter protections against prejudicial pretrial publicity, especially in high-profile cases. These findings also support media literacy education, which can help audiences critically evaluate how stories are framed. For advocacy groups working to prevent wrongful convictions, research like this highlights how powerful narrative tone can be in shaping assumptions before all the facts are known. While the findings were strong, the sample size was small and participants were gathered online. A larger, more diverse sample might reveal even stronger or more nuanced effects. Future research could test more types of crimes, incorporate mock juror instructions, or explore long-term effects of repeated exposure to sensationalized stories. Nonetheless, this study provides a meaningful foundation for future work. To summarize, tone matters. Sensationalized reporting significantly changes how people judge suspects, how confident they feel, how fearful they become, and how dangerous they believe someone is, even when facts do not change. These findings reinforce the importance of ethical reporting and the need to understand how media shapes public perception. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.